2025 NFL is here, and we barely made it on air today. The problems are ridiculous. So I'm Cris. I'm here with Ron. Hopefully there's new people joining us. So, let's start off with, how are you doing, Ron? And what the hell did you do this summer?
Yeah, well, let's talk about North Dakota. Got to my 50th state. That was fantastic for us. We bucket list item out. We were in Montreal. We did travel around, some writing here or there to keep in touch with the NCAA and NFL, but that's what the off season is for, to recharge the batteries. Everybody starts 0-0. We start 0-0. So I'm feeling good right now, putting the finishing touches on the NFL and ready to start really getting into the season.
What the hell did I do? Oh, I went to Bangkok, and I was there for that earthquake on the 18th or 19th floor. I, honest to God, thought I was a goner. I saw all this crap flying over my balcony from above. 38 major cracks developed in my hotel room. I watched them. I had to run down the stairs. It was beyond ridiculous, just beyond ridiculous. Came home and I took off. I changed, this is topical, because I went back to what I used to do, and I didn't do any NFL work all summer, and I'm very pleased about that. I don't think I was getting the benefit of staying really, really on top of it, because I think I was able to stay at least somewhat in touch for the most part, just on my timelines naturally. So I didn't worry about it. And I did do a massive data farming over the last couple of weeks, though. I'm really happy with that. I did my 23 and 24 autopsies, and I found some things, some ways I think I'm going to be saving some money, some good filters. So I'm going to reduce bet size or increase bet size on particular plays going forward. That's going to be a great help. And I think it's 16 charts that I'll have at my fingertips, where I will instantly be able to quickly find situation history and in various different forms, straight up against the spread, teaser, that type of stuff. So I did get a lot of stuff done.
First tip of the year right there. Always do your own autopsy of how you've done, what your record was in certain situations, how you handled certain situations, how you went from priors to adjusting during the season. Record keeping is so important to know what one's individual strengths and weaknesses are, because if you don't do that, you may not realize something you're doing is a strength, and something you're not doing up to the capacity that you could do it. So even though we've been at it for decades, especially me, a couple of extra decades maybe, I don't take anything for granted. You just keep going back and you keep trying to improve, because there's so many things out there on the internet and other stuff that can drive you crazy. You just got to keep to your own methodology.
For those that are unfamiliar, we're not trying to be an entertainment show. We're not trying to sell anything. What we did is we turned our regular conversation that we have between us and figured, well, let's try to incorporate a reasonable portion of that conversation into something that other people could be a part of. So we encourage participation, questions, whatever. And we are not prepared ahead of time for anything. We wing it naturally. We try to have a conversation, and the vast majority of the time, some good information develops, or some good thoughts, different angles, that sort of thing.
Yeah, nothing to add really there. We appreciate any of the questions. It stimulates our own thought processes. And that's what we're just trying to do, just bounce ideas off each other and bounce some of the early opinions. We know that 4 weeks from now, something unexpected will happen where we're going to change our mind on a few teams here and there. And obviously, week one results, we don't want to pivot too much from week one results because we know there's going to be a couple of outcomes that nobody anticipates. But that's all right. That's why we're doing all this stuff beforehand. That's why my own particular team sheets have all this information about what I'm looking for week by week. And if those benchmarks are not met, then I have to pivot.
Before we go, we're going to do the AFC Conference. We're going to run through it. And I think it's actually going to be pretty good because Ron's obviously on the ball and I'm not as much. So I'm going to come at it from various angles, I think. The idea is not to have a presentation of prepared stuff. I'm going to try to share this though. I'd like to share this. I think it's really interesting. Hold on. How do I do my share screen here? Well, go ahead and talk, Ron.
Okay, go ahead and talk. So I'm about 48 hours from finishing my entire NFL preview. So I'm doing what I call is a win grid. You guys won't be able to see it, but that's all right. It's just every team and the expectations for every game. There's only 272 outcomes that are possible. So if I don't do a win grid and I add up, well, this team's going to have 9 wins and this team's going to have 10 wins. If it adds up to 278, then that's wrong. So I'm trying to get to where I think each game, each outcome is going to be. So I get a kind of an idea of my writing, my key checkpoints, and the win probabilities for each team. So I'm going to be finishing that up. Obviously, we're about less than an hour from cutdown day, the 53-man roster. Now, keep in mind that roster is fluid. Teams like Carolina, teams like New Orleans, and so on, they are going to grab cuts from Baltimore and cuts from Philadelphia. So the rosters are fluid right now. The final rosters that we're looking at, probably not till next week.
I think this chart is on display, is it not?
It is here.
I think this is mighty, mighty interesting because last season, the home dogs performed the worst this century. 26.6 straight up, only 46% against the spread. Both numbers are the lowest of the 2000s. Very interesting. You look, obviously the road favorites are the highest, and the favorites in general were extremely high. Over 71% straight up. And it doesn't sound like a huge number, but 53.4% covering favorites as a whole is a huge shift. That's a huge shift. I think, Ron, you'll agree with me that we anticipate some regression, not only in that, but look at that 54% on the overs.
Yeah, so every 6 or 7 years or so, you get these differing results that you haven't seen. And in this particular case, you could tell from the number of teams that finished 8-9, 9-8, and so on. There were the haves and the have-nots in the NFL last year. And I never saw such a great divide, at least not for several years, where you had 5 or 6, you knew who the top 5 or 6 teams were. And you knew at the bottom, there were like 9 or 10 teams, not just 3 or 4, but 9 or 10 teams that their power rating, their performance on the field, you could see it. They weren't close to league average. And because of that, you have the haves and the have-nots. And that's my explanation as to why we saw more favorites win, because there were teams that were just so much better than other teams. And we're going to see regression this year. I'm pretty sure that that's going to get a lot closer. Some of the teams we think are going to be really bad, they're going to jump up to the middle of the pack. And some of the teams that we think are going to be really good will surprise us. We think they're going to win 10 games. They're going to win 7 or 8.
Now, the charts that I created for myself Boy, I'm so envious of this nice, colorful, organized chart. I'm a handwritten mess, but I'm doing stuff like this just with different types of information. Uh, what I thought was in relation to what you were saying, I took a look at the double-digit favorites for last year, and I don't have it with me, but I remember it clearly. It just seemed, from my memory, and that's what's great about autopsies, because I'm going to bring up a couple of things from my autopsies. But didn't it seem like there were teams that would blow out others, and there were big spreads and such, and it wasn't a particularly closely played season across the board necessarily, even though there was a lot of close finishes?
Yeah, I'm always schedule where you play a team and when you play a team is very important. That schedule layout that comes out in the second or third week in May just really shifts the opinions, at least for me, when I see trap games, when I see we're going to have it late in the season where we see a divisional game, then a non-division, then it was Philadelphia and Washington play week 15, Philadelphia and Washington play week 17. We have those kinds of examples. And so in those situations, the middle game kind of gets skewed. But when you don't have those situations, then the top teams were just beating the bottom teams. I think with Survivor, for example, that wasn't always the case weeks 1 and 2. A lot of people got eliminated right away. But then form, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not much of a contest player, form kind of leveled out after about 3 or 4 weeks. And you saw a lot of the favorites just win.
The reason, well, what I find kind of humorous is all the struggles the people in Survivor have had. How many double-digit games do you think there was last year, and how many do you think there are normally in a given year?
That's why I love this unscripted part. I have to think right off the top of my head. Double-digit in general, I would say an average of 1 a week, a little more than 1 a week. So let's call it 20. Really shouldn't be much more than that as far as how many there are.
There is an average of 34 per year over the last 10 years. There's an average of 34 per year, and last year was the lowest number of double-digit games since 20. I believe the entire 10 years, but the closest other year was 2017. So there were only 17 double-digit games last year, which that's a pretty low number for one. And then the other oddity was the first one that lost didn't happen until Thanksgiving weekend with Washington.
Oh, okay. So we saw a lot of upsets, but not a lot of upsets for teams that were double-digit favorites is what happened there. And, it's hard to be a double-digit favorite in the NFL, but then again, that's a very interesting stat because we had some lopsided teams that were really bad, but still not double digit.
Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Anyway, let's take a glance at this just in case you guys are curious. This is not my chart, but these are the land rates of these numbers. And part of what I'm doing, and I want your thoughts on this, Ron, I am charting the last 10 years and I'm charting the last 5 years personally.
Yeah.
How do you feel about breaking up the last 10 years in two?
Well, here's the thing. I think you can use the last 3 years and you should get more 1s and 2s because the 2-point conversion. I think you have to cut it off where they changed where the extra point was. When the extra point became the 33-yard extra point, that's when ones and twos start coming into play, in my opinion. And that would probably mean fewer sevens, because teams now, when they score a touchdown at 14, they're starting to go for two. So the game is at 8 or 6. So I think 7 is losing some of its steam. And then ones and twos, predictably, have been gaining a little bit of steam in the last 3 years.
So these are the updated land rates over and by those sections. Personally, and I had an exchange with somebody far smarter than I am. Nevertheless, because I told him yesterday that I just kind of, like to split it up and use it as just kind of as a knowledge sort of thing. And I actually contacted him again this morning because I was thinking about it. And I'm like, wait a minute, I actually value the last 5 years more than the previous 5 years, a fair amount. I got to let him know that. I didn't want him to think I was kind of sandbagging what my opinions were. And I'll tell you why. I think the game has changed so much over the past 4 to 5 years that you can throw out the previous 5 years almost. As far, I mean, what you're seeing happening now, like usually when you see peaks and valleys and ebbs and flows, there's a regression back to the way it was, that sort of thing. I don't think we're going back. I think that this is the game, so to speak. We've had the kickoff changed. We've had a huge increase on fourth down attempts, and it's only going to get higher. We've got far more two-point conversions. We've had rule changes. The quarterback mobility is much higher. The change and the importance of having a good rushing game has changed. Increased pass completion and decreased pass defense. I mean, you can go on and on with what has happened just in the past 4 or 5 years, enough for me to sit there and say, wait a minute, this 2015 to 2020 or 2019 just doesn't quite matter as much anymore in a lot of situations. In a lot of situations, the same is the same. But I think you can start to look at the recent years and say, hey, this is the new game. This is what we have.
We saw, for example, yards per carry, which was a constant number, 4.1 or 4.2 at the most, every single year for 23 years. I used to show you that chart. That changed the last 3 years. Yards per carry has gone up, and it's a noticeable change. Even 1/10 of a yard is a noticeable change, and it's changing about 2/10 of a yard. Post-COVID, we've seen home field advantage be recalculated to a smaller number. At least that's my opinion. And then everything else you said about the rule changes, the kickoffs, everything favoring quarterbacks and offense. And then the new style of quarterback that's come in. Very few drop back passers and a lot more run pass balance. Get that person out of the pocket. And even with more mobile quarterbacks, sacks have inched up just a little bit. So it is hard to trust data pre-COVID.
I think I have more to say, but I think we should get the ball rolling on the AFC. And
more observations when we do the NFC. This is a good time to pivot and talk about teams.
And again, I may not have completed my thought on taking summers off previously. I used to come back from 100-day break and know nothing. I mean, seriously, I couldn't begin. I'd be lucky to know the team nicknames. I'm exaggerating, of course, but I'm telling you, you'd be shocked at how little I knew. So it doesn't concern me at all, because going through all my data and stuff, the other thing I'd like to say is I feel zero pressure about, the games are coming up next week. I got to get some action in. What am I going to take? There's going to be no frenzy to get bets in. I started off last year down the drain. I started off 25 units down, I think, after week 3 or 4, and ended up having a really good year after a great comeback. And I'm not going to dig I'm not interested in digging myself into a hole out of the game. So, but I'm not concerned with my lack of knowledge. So what I like about it is being able to just give what my opinion is, or my instincts, or my thoughts, or biases are, and just go from there. You want to start with Baltimore? Go division by division, alphabetically?
Sure. I'll scramble around. I will match whatever we need to match with paperwork and everything.
I couldn't believe, I didn't realize Jackson was 41 touchdowns for 4 turnovers or interceptions. That's just impressive. And you combine that with Derrick Henry, 1,912 yards rushing, and I don't know how many yards passing. It's just fascinating, and I'm interested with this team because I've always had high hopes for the team, and they always let us down. And I'm wondering whether they're going to be like the Cleveland Indians back in the day and just have a great team and fade away. But as I read more on it, you realize they're just so darn loaded. It's really hard for them to fail. I forget who their backup quarterback is, but they've got a better backup this year too, don't they?
Let me chart that for you. Backup is Cooper Rush. He is better because he can actually throw the ball. The other guys couldn't throw it.
They had. Oh, and they had. Did you have that as a top 5 draft?
Yes, it was in my top 3 draft. There were 3 really good drafts and 4 really bad drafts. And just a little nugget, because the college players are more skilled. They play a little bit more like the professional game. They're older because they stay in school longer, and so on and so forth. If you take the top 5 or 10 teams that did well in the draft, they generally outperform season win totals. And conversely, if you take the bottom 5 or 10 teams, we're talking 90% over the last 2 years alone, just going by what perceptions are from the draft alone, because some of these people can contribute right away. So that's a big stat. The biggest stat, Cris, for Baltimore is the playoff stat. And you look for these things and you try to think, why is Baltimore failing? They seem to be the best team over the last few years. But it's, you take a team with Lamar Jackson, and in their last 9 playoff games, they're minus 13 turnovers. So, that's like committing 24, 25 turnovers for a whole season. Minus 25 turnovers. That's giving away 5 points every time you hit the field with a minus 9 turnover and minus 13 in 9 games. Each turnover 3.5 points. That's the problem. They're either beating themselves or they're not turning the other team over in the playoffs. When this team has my highest power rating.
Well, let's look at what the Achilles is with this team. Minus 361 in penalties. Is that correct? That's insanity.
Yeah. We've talked about this, about late game and late half management. The stupid pass interference penalty at the wrong time, the going off sides, the hold, whatever it is, they're beating themselves in crucial situations. You look at their record over the last 3, 4, 5 years. How many times do they lose by double digits? Probably very, very seldom. I mean, it's hard to beat this team, but they get beat at the wire a few times because they're self-inflicted wounds a lot of times. We've seen them. How many times have we seen them blow second half leads because they do something stupid in their pass defense? They know the other team's passing, but they're still taking chances, or they're doing something wrong.
What really murdered them? They were around 70% on pass defense, weren't they?
Baltimore last year, 63.5 pass defense. So kind of the league average. The league average right these days is right around 64.
What about the playoffs?
The playoffs is a different story. Obviously you see better teams in the playoffs, so we have to use that as a caveat there. you're not playing the worst teams in the playoffs for the most part. So yeah, it creeps up. Every team has a little playoff kryptonite, but they tense up a little bit in the playoffs, and they throw in a coverage. They do some things that they're not doing in the regular season, and it's turnover driven. It's all turnover driven. Thanks for all the comments and everybody who's catching us live. I see all the comments. I can't respond to them, but I see them all.
So we have high expectations for Baltimore. I don't think really you can go anywhere. The proof is in the pudding in the playoffs, and they do have a pathway to the 1 seed. It's not that's what they got to do. They got to show up in the playoffs and actually reach their goal, for once.
Yeah, let me put this out because this is a strange comment I'm going to make. But hey, I talk about week 18 and week 1, and I won't talk about it later on. They play Pittsburgh to end the year at Pittsburgh. Those games are the most brutal that we have. The old Chicago, Green Bay, 50s, 60s, 70s. This is Pittsburgh and Baltimore, just a street fight. If they do not have the number 1 seed, they're going to be beat up a little bit the first round of the playoffs. I just want to get that out there right now, that this team, more than Buffalo and Kansas City, probably needs the number 1 seed more than the other 2, because playing at Pittsburgh on closing day is no picnic.
I'm kind of sick of Cincinnati. I don't know why. I saw the quarterback's documentary, and I thought it was very interesting. And, Burrow is obviously in consideration for the best quarterback. If he's not, he's like right up there at number 2. So solid quarterback. He's got some solid tools to work with. He's got a good offense. They signed Hendrickson, which is great, and for 1 year. But this, and for whatever reason, because they reached that Super Bowl, and because Burrow, strikes fear in us so much, I think we just have an inflated view of the team. They had a horrible draft, if I'm not mistaken, and their defense is bad, and I'm starting to wonder how good of coaching staff they really have. And I'm going to say, show me with the team. Obviously, they've lost the first 2 games of the season at least 3 years in a row. They just need to get off to a decent start, and that'll be a much different climate for them, and they won't have to be coming back from behind as much. But I don't know how you see them. I'm just not going to anoint them. I think there's better teams. I think that they're going to have a tough time getting into the playoffs.
Unfortunately for Cincinnati, the same old problems are the same old problems again. Did they fix the offensive line? I'm not really sure they did. Do they have a go-to elite tight end? I'm not sure that they do. Do they have, even with Hendrickson signed and happy, and I'm happy for him because a really good player, they were still in the bottom tier in terms of how many sacks they produced last year. He had half their sacks, 17 and a half out of, I think, 36 sacks last year. So this is a team that doesn't get to the quarterback very much, has ignored their secondary. There's no household names really in the secondary anymore. And if they wanted to try to fix that with a new coordinator, these are some of the things that I look for in preseason games. Well, you got a new coordinator. Is your scheme changing? What are you doing differently? Problem with Cincinnati, they looked even worse defensively in the preseason, even with the new coordinator. So we're talking shootouts again.
It seems like they're at least making an effort to change things up. I think obviously they're unhappy with themselves and have much higher aspirations. I don't know how Burrow puts up with the way the management jerks around people with their salaries, but they showed up in preseason. They played in preseason unlike other years. So maybe they can get a heads up out of the gate on this, but they're obviously coming in a different way. I still want to see it on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland. I'm not going to talk about any 5th round draft picks. It is a complete and utter waste of my time. And I'm sick and tired of hearing horrible offense, pretty darn good defense. They only was the 12 turnovers for the season. Was that on offense or defense or defensive?
They were minus 22 in turnover ratio, so you pretty much know that they didn't take away the ball very much. And minus 22 is a number that certainly skews by regression that they're going to be better than minus 22 this year. So they're going to save a lot of points. Question is, are they going to save points and be a cover team, or are they going to save points and be a win team?
Well, that's what it is. Just 12 total takeaways for the season. It's not even one per game. It just seems, I only can think of one other team that was lower than that.
Yeah, look at their first 6 weeks. They host Cincinnati, actually a win shot there. Then at Baltimore, host Green Bay. Green Bay will have extra rest. At Detroit, no fun there. Go to England to play Minnesota, and Minnesota will have already been there a week. And then go back to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh will be off a week. There's no look ahead for Pittsburgh because they'll be rested with a full bye week. If they don't win week 1, you're staring at 0-6.
Here's my opinion on. I don't understand. I think that I don't think the coach is in the hot seat in the least. I think he's getting a free pass for the whole Watson debacle. So he doesn't have any stress. He's not going to be making any hasty decisions. They can dump, and the coaching staff is not going to worry about it. So I think it's an interesting opportunity for Cleveland to improve their draft slot, play around, learn what players they have, play this quarterback roulette, and be done with it. I mean, they can't have high aspirations at this point. So I think it's dump time for them.
I look at the situation with Joe Flacco, and he gives them by far the best chance to win because he can see open receivers. He's not going to be as sack prone as anybody else they put out there, including the now traded Kenny Pickett. None of them would have been able to escape the pocket because it's not a fantastic offensive line. Their running game is in flux. They drafted two running backs. One of them has a legal issue. He hasn't signed. The other one is going to be eased into the game. So they're going to go running back by committee. Love their tight end play. And I think Flacco can utilize that. But the minute Flacco is either injured or substituted out, I think we're talking tank city for Cleveland. It would be more interesting to me if Cleveland had a flipped schedule, if they played their last 6 opponents first and eased in and got some taste of winning with Flacco. But it's just going to be hard. I actually think their team is improved in a lot of areas, but I don't know it's going to be shown in the win column. Ford's probably the starting running back, although he's generally a tandem running back. The question from City by the Bay. They're going to hopefully the Tennessee running back that they drafted is going to get a good share of the carries because I think he's pretty good. But Jenkins was supposed to have that role, but he's the guy unsigned.
I'm going to steal some of your thunder with Pittsburgh and mention as Watt goes, Pittsburgh goes. Without Watt, that defense has a significant result history. We know that. Here's an odd thing I never even knew. Tomlin's never had a losing season. Did you know that?
Something to add to my arsenal. I'll put it in the formula.
I remember their defense is pretty darn good. They're in decent shape there. We're going to have to see, how Rodgers does. I think he'll be okay. I think he's got enough to work with on tools. one of the issues that I wonder is I honestly felt like we saw poor judgment on Tomlin's behalf in games. I think he had poor game management, poor strategy, and I just get the sense that he's stuck in the past a little bit too much. He certainly, and he changed. He had a hell of a lot more emotion on the sidelines than in the past also. So just he's changing, but maybe in different ways. I don't remember specifically, but I remember he was making mistakes, sort of like how we were ahead of the game with Harbaugh when he went through that phase. And any thoughts on that?
Well, the brutal second half schedule really, they weren't good enough to handle that. And I don't know about you, but I was hoping that they would win a lot of games early because that meant we were going to get more value when they faced the real tough teams on the schedule. And we saw what happened. They just couldn't. They still won, what was it, 10 games, but most of their losses came when they played the brutal half of the schedule. Yeah, I have a few thoughts here. Arthur Smith was a less than innovative hire as offensive coordinator. He had a chance to change the dynamic there, and he didn't change the dynamic. And I think that's a problem. The other issue and why this is one of 2 or 3 teams that I have difficulty setting a power number on, is because I can't mind meld with Aaron Rodgers from week to week. I don't know what his state of the union, where is he from one week to the next and this and that. I can tell you this, though. He's a year older and they have an early bye. So he's going to be all in for a while. But when you're going to play 13 consecutive games after the bye week, somewhere in the middle of November or the end of November, I think we're going to have a fatigue problem with Rodgers because he's older. That's just the way life is.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm like you. I love Pittsburgh for the first half of the year, but I got stuck on them through that rough ending. Unfortunately, I just couldn't get off of them. So kind of bittersweet. What division next?
Let's go to the East. Let's go to Buffalo.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Buffalo is right there, a half a point. I have 32 as my opening power rating for Baltimore. I have 31.5 for Buffalo. But there are warning signs with Buffalo. One question I would have is, how does Josh Allen do any better than he did last year with his turnover aversion? I mean, he had 14 fewer turnovers last year than the year before. Now, maybe he can match that, but he can't beat that. And Buffalo, different than Cleveland, their turnover ratio was plus 24. And as I wrote and sent to you, it was something like plus 10 or plus 14 in fumble differential, which is a random stat for the most part.
Plus 14.
So basically that may be historically the best ever for fumble differential. That's not repeatable. So they're not going to have as many free points. There's no way they can do that. Their roster in the secondary, I worry about their roster in the secondary. So that's unlike unlike Baltimore that doesn't have a regular season Achilles heel. Buffalo's Achilles heel tends to be the secondary, I believe. So if we have turnover regression and teams are able to pass on them, I think they're still winning the division. And obviously I still have them neck and neck with Baltimore. But I think there's some warning signs that we have to think about at least.
Yeah, originally just not paying attention, but the word on the street, or it just seemed like the sense was people thinking that, this team is going to win, only lose 1 or 2 games. And I remember looking at their schedule, going through it, saying, boy, it is pretty hard to bet under on them. But as you pointed out, plus 24 turnovers, plus 14 fumbles. We know that that's not going to happen. Allen actually, really did much better than in, years past, taking care of the ball, avoiding sacks. And that's not going to, probably remain the same either. The defense was a problem, but they went 100% defense on their first 5 picks, if I'm not mistaken, which is a darn good start. But I think that there's going to be something that just, kind of, disrupts them as far as I'm concerned. I'm not sold that they're the best team in the AFC. I think there could be several teams, and they just can't seem to get that Kansas City monkey off their back. When it counts. I have a question for you. Who's got the most? What quarterback has the most touchdown passes in the last 3 years?
Oh, well, if it's not Mitch Trubisky, who could it be? Well, I guess I'll say Josh Allen then.
No. He's number 2 to Jared Goff. I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Oh, okay. We got a Detroit Lion reference. Okay. Yeah, look at Buffalo's late season schedule. It's not pretty. At Houston, at Pittsburgh, then home to Cincinnati. But Cincinnati will have 3 extra days. And Cincinnati-Buffalo games have been tight. So you can't automatically give them the win. At New England, divisional game. New England can be tough at home. At Cleveland, the only reason that's a tough game is it's the second of back-to-back road games, the 4th in a 5-week road game stretch. So it's not easy at all. Then they have to play Philly out of the conference, a team they're relatively unfamiliar with, and then close against the Jets. So we'll give them close against the Jets, but we've got a 5-game stretch that's not going to be easy.
And they're in a 10-day rest disadvantage. But that reminds me, have you actually gone back to see what the rest advantage and disadvantage records actually end up turning out to be in reality?
No, because I don't take it just because you're minus 19 or minus 12 or minus 7 or minus 8. It's really when those rest disadvantages are. Is it a road Monday night game and then another road game? Is it a divisional game and then a non-divisional game? There's so much more than just the number. So I take it situationally, and maybe for better or worse, I'm not that interested in historically.
I have so many distractions around me. It's to concentrate. I don't think Buffalo's going to win 13 games, to answer that question that popped up there. So I agree with the comment that says if they get hit with injuries, they're not deep. And it does seem every year they get a couple of injuries, and all of a sudden it's heavy worry time for Buffalo.
Do you feel by the day that home team last season covered 53% of the time? That's actually a high number for home teams. Home field advantage has generally been reduced over the last few years, and I have it back down to about 1.5 is the home field advantage. Prime time, I might bump it up to 2, but there's no more talk in the past that it was a 3-point home field advantage. That's gone by the wayside.
Yeah, but there's been a shift because it is starting to switch back a little bit, adjusting toward the home benefiting, supposedly. But again,
you know why that is, though, is because the schedule maker just plays darts with these schedules and puts people on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays and this and that, and doesn't care that you're on a road game and now you're going to play on Christmas Day and you're going to play another road game or something like that. I think the NFL just doesn't care about that part of the schedule, and that's creating some home advantages.
Yeah, you see the same problems develop over and over again. It makes no sense. I've gone up and down on this Miami. I thought that they were complete garbage. It just seemed like they were coming off the wheels were coming off the bus. during the summer for a reason or two. But they actually have more to them than I kind of realized. I think that they, if they get I know the expectations aren't high, but they've got some tools. But it depends on whether Tua can stay healthy or not. Because when he was out of that lineup last year, my gosh, I mean, that team was inept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you really look and carefully at the stat sheet last year, it's not bad. They came into the season beat up. They had 2 or 3 guys on the defensive line that weren't ready to play yet. They weren't healthy. They had 25 sacks in their last 9 games. And that's more representative of what Miami does defensively. I have them exceeding their sack total from last year by maybe as much as 8 to 10. So I think they're going to put more pressure on opposing quarterbacks. They have a couple of problems. They don't have a wide receiver 3. And that's a problem because you don't know what time of day Tyreek Hill is going to walk off from the team or do whatever or get hurt. So there's a big drop at certain positions, partly because as somebody who studied the draft for decades, Miami doesn't draft that well. So they don't have a lot of talent behind their starters. And the other issue I have is they may play 3 cold weather games at the end of the year, and that's been a problem for Miami as well. We don't know how cold it's going to be in mid-December, early December, probably pretty cold in late December and early January. So Miami didn't get the best of the schedule layout. But the team as a whole, especially when they start out without injuries, they have a playoff caliber team until the injury bug hits.
What about the coaching? I think one of the players who ended up getting traded made a real backhanded comment regarding the lack of coaching that was in Miami or the lack of discipline.
Yeah, as somebody who watched all the conferences in college and watched the coaches and watched some of the players, I'm looking for command presence. I just have a feeling that McDaniel, he doesn't have that overall command presence, a leader of guys that puts fear in whatever. I think he would be a mad scientist if he reverts back to an offensive coordinator job. But I think he's more analytical as the head coach, which is both a positive and a negative, because as the head coach, you have to be the leader in a lot of different ways, just not only just analytical. So my take on him is that part of the job he doesn't qualify for and part of the job he's overqualified for.
Let's not forget that vision during that one cold weather game where he's bundled up like the Michelin Man.
Yeah.
And he caught a lot of flack for that.
Yeah. That would be me, but I'm not the coach, so I could be bundled up.
And Birdie brings up a point. They can't beat anybody over 500. They're going to have to do that at some point.
Yeah, and if you get them and you put double whammy on them, they're having trouble beating playoff type teams, and then they're in cold weather. They have to get a lot of win equity early while they're healthy.
I think the longest list of free agent acquisitions goes to New England. Not only the number, but the amount of money that they spent on players. Yeah. They really went after trying to address some of the weaknesses that they had. And obviously, we've got whatever his name is, Vrabel and McDaniels taking over coaching. It's a lot of optimism on this New England. May did a pretty darn good job with no tools, and he's going to have a few tools this year. So what are your expectations over there?
Yeah, this is going to be one of those teams that September's really important because they're going to start 9 new players. maybe even more, but they're probably going to start 9 new players than what they ended last year. There's a direct correlation to spending the most money in free agency and winning the next year. Not winning in the long term, but winning the next year, because they're all getting the new contracts, they're all happy, and then they're off and they're in free agency again. So that's good for New England. New England also was one of the top 3 teams on my list on draft day. So they've actually improved their coaching. We know that they have a head coach bump. They've improved their short-term roster with free agency, and they've improved their long-term roster with the draft. So there should be a lot of excitement for New England. Now they have to prove it on the field, because they were one of the worst teams in the league last year. So it's written in pencil in terms of how I'm going to be looking at them. And their numbers shot up. I mean, you're looking at 8.5 win total, for example, and it just seemed unrealistic that they could go all the way to 9-8. But the more you look at it, it is possible. I don't think I'll find 9 wins on my win grid, but I wouldn't be surprised either, because they're going to be highly competitive this year with all the things we mentioned, and the schedule is a 4th place schedule.
They were in games last year. Their metrics were not, bad. I know I was on New England a fair amount throughout the course of the season. So they got hit by the injury bug also, but there was already something there.
Yeah. One bad metric was 28-52 sack ratio. So they were minus 24 in the sack ratio. It doesn't show up as turnovers, but you're going to punt more or force the other teams to punt less when you're getting sacked and you're not getting to the opposing quarterback. Sack ratio is a very important metric to me. And this particular year, I have it almost dead even, as opposed to the minus 24 last year.
I was amused that you pointed out they don't play a game west of the Mississippi.
Yeah. If I have my geography right, that's good for New England.
Jets. As I was doing my autopsy, I've already asked you this question, and nobody has come close. As I was doing my autopsy of last year, and the thing I want to add about doing an autopsy, I like to do it before the start of the next season, because it really reminds you of a lot of stuff, and you remember specific games and situations, and some good stuff, some pain. I kept noticing the Jets were favored. How many times? I asked you how many times the Jets were favored. I think you gave me the answer 6.
That's pretty high, huh?
They were favored 11 times last year. 11. How the hell were they favored 11 times? And sadly, I was on them for a lot of them. The metrics, their defense was pretty good. It played okay. The offense was completely inept.
Yeah, defense was top 5. Yeah, my autopsy, I only bet on or against them 3 times. 1 win, 2 losses. So I'm not thrilled about the record, but at least I kind of have a habit is I don't like to take the Jets as a favorite in any decade. So that probably steered me off getting crushed in terms of possible favorite losses. They actually outperformed their Pythagorean theorem numbers last year. So that's why you were probably on them, because by virtue of what was going on during the season, they were supposed to win some games, and they didn't get it done.
I'm surprised you're not chomping at the bit to point out that their special teams sucked. But they replaced the special teams coach with a pretty inexperienced new guy. So cause for concern how much better their special teams will play. And I ask you, who will be the starting quarterback there week 8?
Week 8, because Fields isn't going to be there. Well, I tell you that Tyrod Taylor is a better quarterback than Fields. I mean, I know that from the start. So I have a game plan that we won't probably be getting into, of course, for each team. And my game plan is when Fields is going to be forced to pass against teams that are going to make them one-dimensional and he has to pass, he's not going to win. because he can't win without using his legs as leverage. Now, Fields can throw a deep pass and he can throw people open, but there's going to be inconsistency. Garrett Wilson is not going to have Aaron Rodgers tell him that if I ask you to run a 10-yard route, I want you to run a 10-yard route. That's the way Aaron Rodgers is precision football. Justin Fields does not throw a wide receiver open. It's going to be a culture change for some of the Jets wide receivers. And I'm not a big Justin Fields fan, except for when he plays weaker defenses.
Do you think the defense takes a big hit without Salah's influence, or are the players they have fundamentally sound enough to maintain it?
Yeah, so that's a tough question, and that's a good question to be asked. I think no, because they're getting Jermaine Johnson back. He's a key piece to the defensive line. He missed all of last year. That helps. I think they signed another person in free agency. Sauce Gardner covers half the field extremely well. There's a lot of pieces I like defensively, and I still think they're going to field a pretty tough defense. Question is wear down. What if time of possession goes against them because Fields is missing throws? And the schedule doesn't get easy, I think, until the late. Their last few games are not bad. The problem is before that, it's not that great a schedule considering the talent level on this team. I mean, if you look at the team, they don't have a lot of great tight ends. They're going to rely on a rookie. They have one wide receiver that I trust and not the other ones. The offensive line has two really good parts at tackle, but they're rookie. One's a rookie and one's in their second year, and he barely played the first year because of injury. So essentially they have two rookie tackles. So how do you develop this with a new staff right away?
Yeah, it's they're always an enigma to me. It doesn't really matter. It's just not a division I'm in tune with at all.
Well, let's go south.
Oh no, I'm missing a team in the next division. What did I miss?
Oh no,
I got three teams. Well, Houston. They had some inopportune injuries. I think that were unfortunate. I mean, who's their receiver again? I didn't write his name down.
Is it Dell? Tank Dell? Is that team? No, it's somebody else. Downs Dell. Their superstar receiver is Peoples Jones. No, I'm blanking out. Somebody help us. Collins.
Yeah, Nico Collins. There it is.
Collins. He missed 3 or 4 games.
I mean, Stroud had nobody to throw to when both of those guys were out, and it was just unfortunate.
Yeah, Diggs too. That's right.
They had a lot of crazy endings too. You know, they blew that game against Detroit. I know they blew a couple of other games. They also won a couple of late ones too. But that defense was pretty darn good.
So they came into last year with some real negative metrics. And even though it was the AFC South, I had no choice but to go against them because we're talking 7 out of every 8 times a team with that profile goes under their win total. Now they ended up with 10 wins, which matched their win total. There were some 10.5s, but let's just say that matched their win total. And part of that, Chris, was because they got really lucky early in the season because Jacksonville, Indianapolis, and Tennessee couldn't win despite themselves. I mean, Houston was handing the game to them, and they couldn't take advantage. And after that, Houston reset itself and got better and got competitive, especially against some of the better teams. And Houston's in that same boat again this year. Their metrics are not that good, but who's going to beat them in the division?
I was on Houston most of the season. I was on them a lot last season when most people were down on them. I thought their metrics were pretty darn good. If anything, they fell short on what they were expected to do.
Great pass defense, but they allowed 54 sacks. The offensive line continues to be a work in progress.
Yeah, that's a big problem. But I think Stroud certainly didn't have as good a season as his rookie season, but I thought he did just fine. He has some weaknesses, but the strengths far outweigh it. I'd like to have him as a quarterback if I had a team.
See, that's a good point because we knew that, what do we always say? There's tape on a quarterback, so opposing teams are going to adjust. Before his rookie season, if you just said, hey, this is what year 2 is going to look like for Stroud, here's his numbers, you would have said, yeah, that's good. That's excellent for a rookie, a second-year quarterback and stuff. No problem with Stroud. Teams are going to make adjustments against him, and it's up to his offensive coordinator and his quarterback coach to counter those adjustments. It's always a chess match.
When you have an offensive line like that and you're missing Dell and Collins and you fare as well as he did, it's a success.
Let's talk about one other thing. He had virtually no running game his first year, and he put up exceptional numbers. They got Joe Mixon, who the one great thing about Joe Mixon is he never fumbles.
Well, he fumbled and got himself suspended this season.
Well, there's rumors going around all over the place about why he's out, but there's a chance that we may not see him for a good portion of the season. And there's some problems with the running back rotation. We may be looking again at Stroud pretty much one-dimensional, not being able to rely on his run game and having to throw into coverage because teams aren't going to respect Houston's run game. And, basically, if Houston wasn't in this division, they would be a play against team constantly.
You didn't mention this guy, but, somebody in my DMs was really high on Houston and felt that the most underrated pickup of the offseason is a guy named Jacob Johnson.
Jacob Johnson? You're going to stump me on this one.
Yeah, well, you didn't mention him. I don't know anything about sports. That's why I'm asking you.
Off the top of my head, you've stumped me on Jacob Johnson.
Okay.
So I leave it to the audience to give me some feedback on Jacob Johnson. I have their org chart here, so maybe I can come up with something. Jacob Johnson, because I would trying to see what position he even plays if we're talking about
fullback.
Oh, geez. Well, there's a couple of fullbacks in the league, Hustek, who've made a living opening holes for other running backs. If he can do that with this Houston team, I will relent and say, yep, he's good. Nick Chubb, that's right. Nick Chubb, 5 carries, 25 yards, I believe, in the preseason. So we'll see. He's young enough that maybe he can be recovered. They're going to need him.
They will. International player. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Bertie.
I'm going to skip Indianapolis because the Jaguars nauseate me. I mean, I don't know why they paid Lawrence the $50 million. He's got to be on the hot seat at this point because he's basically fitting into the average category, average quarterback category, and he was supposed to be generational talent. They've got the new coaches, which they're probably better off for, but it just seems like there's chaos. What do they have on that team that is, really good? It seems like they just fell apart since their good run a few years ago.
Well, Trent Baalke is gone, the GM, and he was the lowest rated GM. And we used to have a field day talking about him. 17 unranked players, according to my draft grades, in a 3-year period of time. The average number of unranked players a team drafts is about 2.3. So he should have had 7 undraftable players, and he had 17 in a 3-year stretch. That just stunts growth. You're just wasting talent. This year, they bring in a new GM, and they have no unrated players. So were they the greatest players that they drafted? No, but they solved one mystery in that they didn't draft a guy who shouldn't have been drafted. You want the good news for Jacksonville? Very easy schedule in terms of pacing. Every game's on a Sunday. So that's really nice. 16 of them at least. Divisional games to end the year. Minus 15 turnover ratio that when Lawrence is healthy, he can fix. Those are the good things. The bad things, they didn't update at defensive tackle. They're going to have a tough time getting off the field. Their pass defense is way too high. They don't have enough good bodies back there. And Liam Cohen, the new head coach, has barely been anywhere more than 1 year at a time. There was a 4-year stretch that he was at Kentucky, the Rams, Kentucky, the Rams. Then he goes off to wherever he was, Tampa. Then he's here. I mean, can he sit still for 1 minute? I don't trust him.
Well, he probably has multiple families. I don't know. He's trying to get to see him.
All right. We finally solved the problem.
I have no optimism for Jacksonville, so that's where I sit there. Indianapolis, I think we know Richardson is he has his issues. Sure, he can run, but he needs more experience, and he's not learning as fast as he should be, from what I understand.
Yeah.
I don't know how Daniel Jones is going to do there, but maybe it's a breath of fresh air, and the change will do him good. The big
have one. Yeah, we always have Indianapolis fans, so I have one good thing to say about them, but I have to say some of the negative things first. That offensive line's Daniel Jones operating behind that offensive line is not a match made in heaven, because Daniel Jones doesn't have the internal clock to make this work. He's got some good receivers, and the tight end position is really relevant right now because the guy they drafted, he had a decent preseason, and last year they had the leading tight end had about 182 yards for the whole season. Average, what is that, 10 yards a game, 11 yards a game? So that's a plus. The other plus is that everybody's heard me talk about this cover zero defense that they ran, the terrible passive defense, always 70%, 70%, 70%. They had no chance.
It's down to 43.
Yeah, 43% in preseason is not as random as 55% would be in preseason. I'd say, well, who cares? It's 55, 43%. If there's something to that, maybe Indianapolis is on the right track. And then they get a no man's land, Cris, because just when they get the right coordinator and the right defense, they don't have the right quarterback in a quarterback-driven league. And if they start winning 7 or 8 games, they'll never be able to draft the right quarterback in a quarterback-driven league. You don't want to be in the middle of the pack when you need a quarterback. And whether Daniel Jones or Richardson works out, it doesn't seem like a long-term answer. So the more games Indy wins this year, maybe the worse they're off.
I forgot to do Tennessee in my review last night. I mean, the only thing I know is that they'll win week 1.
They will.
Aside from that, I don't know what to expect from them.
They're going to win week 1. Yeah, against Denver, huh? At Denver. That's a tough game. You take your rookie quarterback, your number 1 draft pick, who's not being talked about at all because of all this other drama with other people, and you put him into Denver, who had 63 defensive sacks last year. Not a recipe for success. But I do want to say good things about Tennessee if they can get by some of the early part of the season. Number 1, Indy's a very average team. Number 2, Houston has a few things they have to sort out. Number 3, Jacksonville has a new coach, new staff, and stuff like that. There are wins possible. And there are, I think I added it up there, like 5 favorable scheduling situations where they have at least a 50-50 toss-up kind of situation. This is an over the win total, 5.5 for me. And I don't make a lot of over win totals. So I kind of like Tennessee this year, sneaking up on teams. I like the pacing. They're going to be at home for 6 weeks in a row. I think it is almost 4 weeks, 4 in a row home games and a bye, which is a weird schedule. Again, who knows what the NFL does with scheduling, but that's like Connecticut of last year in the NCAA. They stuck them at home 7 weeks in a row and made their win total 4. I said, wait a second. In Connecticut's going to do better than that because they have such a great pace of schedule against non-bowl teams. And this is like Tennessee, a great home pacing schedule against non-playoff teams.
They face, if they're just a little bit, decent, they can win a fair amount of games with that schedule.
Now, my power rating is bottom 5 for them. So I don't want to say that they're going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but when they play these teams and where they play them and how these other teams are going to be off road games and short weeks and stuff, that evens the playing field. So if they have a whole bunch of toss-up games and a couple where you expect them to win, I do think I'll do the grid, but I'm hoping that it comes out that they're going to win 7 games or more this year just to get over that, give me a little cushion over the 5.5.
I guess what I was always hearing peripherally, can't pronounce that word, throughout the summer is Denver, Denver, Denver. And everybody's very high on Denver. And when teams have high expectations, we know what oftentimes happens. They start to hit some bumps in the road and they start to feel the pressure to perform a little bit. Who knows? That game 1 might be a survivor headache for people. Mm-hmm. It seems like every year that you get a team in that range that loses outright that has no business losing, and I like a lot about Denver. I just worry about them meeting their expectations. I think Nix is okay; he'll be okay. I was on Denver the entire season. Even the game that they lost against Cincinnati was a stone cold middle. So, or maybe I didn't middle that. I did middle it, but they didn't cover the spread though. But it was a nice teaser game. They've got that strong. What did they do with the special teams coach? I have a note there. They did something goofy.
Yeah. Peyton hired his old New Orleans special team coach.
That's right.
He's familiar with. The previous one that they let go is pretty good. So it's kind of a sideways move. I understand Peyton wanting to have his guys and he feels comfortable that way. But the roster, the kickers that were with the other special team coordinator and the gunners and everybody that handles punt and kick return defense, they did just fine with him. So it's kind of a sideways move to me.
The penalty is a huge problem for him.
Yeah. So you mentioned Denver. Can they meet expectations? Their sack ratio was 63-24 plus 39. That's just an enormously good thing. And they've elevated their roster in a couple of areas, especially in terms of getting more sack pressure, if that's even possible. Bo Nix, again, now we have tape on Bo Nix. So just like we had tape on CJ Stroud the year before and Bryce Young, and that caused him to get benched in year 2 because they had tape on Bryce Young. We can expect a little bit of regression, I think, with Denver in terms of the pass game. They have 4 capable running backs. So they're going to be able to mix and match and do things there. And if they really use, Ingram that they brought over? If they really use them, because I thought they were a little light in the tight end room, but if they use them, then they're going to get something out of that. That division is brutal, so you need every win that you can get. They have 9 home games, only 7 true road games because their neutral site game would have been a road game. So there's more to like than not to like with Denver. So I have to say they're still going to be very good.
I seem to recall Denver had some good fortune throughout the season offensively. Every time I tuned in and watched them, I had the sensation of how are they going to score? And again, I watched very little. Maybe it was the timing of when I tuned in, but they had a long way to go offensively. And like you said, with the tape in the second year, that may not necessarily be on Knicks' favor. So we're going to just have to see. I'm not, as much as I loved them last year, I'm not sold on them.
So there's contrarian points of view. Number one, the early season pacing is not to their liking. But number two, they look so sharp in the preseason that they're ready to go out of the gate. So you're going to get Denver's best performance pretty quickly there. You mentioned you were concerned a little bit about their offense. And I understand that completely because it may have seemed that they performed well, but they didn't open up the whole playbook for Bo Nix because he's still a rookie quarterback, regardless of his 50-plus college starts. He's still new to Sean Payton and what Sean Payton wanted him to do. He wanted him to release the ball quickly, no sacks, the opposite of Russell Wilson when Payton and Wilson were together. So they accomplished that. Now they're going to try to add another layer. And we're going to see this as a recurring theme in this division, teams adding another layer. So they'll stretch the field more because they're going to have to, and Peyton plays this game really well, the chess match game. There's tape on what Bo Nix will do, so Peyton wants to change it up.
Since we entered this division, I found this little tidbit pretty interesting. They charted the number of players who played on the field, offense, defense, or special teams for each team this preseason. And amazingly enough, 91 was the highest amount of players. Chargers, Chiefs, Raiders. And then the Broncos right behind at 88. So you have all four teams. And this is the most in the entire NFL. So it's really odd. Other oddity, the other teams for the most, Titans, Browns, Dolphins, Jaguars, Saints. Do you notice a common theme amongst all those teams?
Well, and some of them have new coaches and staffs. So they want to see anything and everything. Obviously, the Rams aren't on the list because you eliminate 22 guys right away because they don't play their starters and stuff like that. So you have fewer players. So that's my first two impressions.
I thought it was odd that they're all in the AFC. Except the Saints.
Interesting. I don't know what to read of it. I have to think about that a little bit more. But Denver did play a lot of its starters, and hence that's why part of the reason they looked good because they played a lot of their starters. That's always that danger in preseason. You look at the preseason numbers, then you say, well, wait a second. They played teams that didn't play their starters, or they did.
The Bengals weren't on that top 10 list, so maybe they played their stars, but not a wide. Just so the other side of that coin, the fewest by 6 players was the Rams.
Every year.
Yeah. And then you had the Falcons, Lions, and Ravens, no surprise. Cowboys, Eagles, Seahawks, and Cardinals, bottom 10.
Yeah, a little surprised at the Cardinals, but no surprise at most of the other teams. We know, if they're veteran teams like the Eagles and the Ravens, there's no need to play a lot of starters.
Well, CD by the Bay just brought up the Chargers. Let's skip down to the Chargers. I couldn't believe Herbert quietly, 23 touchdowns, only 3 picks. That's pretty darn solid.
Yeah.
I was extremely impressed with McConkey last year. Boy, what a nice pickup they have. He's going to be very good. When Dobbins went out, that really hurt Herbert's ability to move the ball. as mentioned, they get Keenan Allen back, McConkey, and Dobbins healthy. Their offense should finally move a little bit, shouldn't it?
Well, as I wrote to you, and as I've said for years, you get less and less out of, what does the preseason mean? And for the Chargers, to me, it validated the fact that they had a top 3 draft. Other people didn't see it that way, but Harbaugh drafts to his specifications. And every one of those players is already making a difference in terms of contributions to the roster. And you're talking about Hampton. He didn't get a lot of carries, but this guy had a running back can come into the NFL and thrive right away as a pass catcher, as a runner, maybe not as much as a third down blocker, but they drafted Hampton in the first round to actually run the ball. Gadsden, their 5th round tight end, has already made a difference in terms of when he had playing time in the preseason, he took advantage of it. He's a stretch the team tight end. This team needed to get better against the run. They didn't draft the highest rated run defender, but they needed one. And he's already contributed in the preseason, showed a lot. He's going to be part of the rotation. They drafted 2 receivers that are going to be part of the rotation. They bring back Keenan Allen recently. And it's not just that, of course, he's had 10, 11, 12 years in the league, but he also has familiarity with Herbert. So they're ready to go. McConkey and everybody else. So just like you said, they've elevated at a lot of different spots. The negative is obviously they just lost their left tackle, stud left tackle. That might set them back a little bit at various times. They still have to prove that they can defend the run. And the other one glaring problem is the NFL didn't do them any favors. They took away a home game from them in the Kansas City series. They made them play against Denver first on a short week and then in probably snow in January. The NFL was not exactly kind in the head-to-head conference matchups with this team. But make no mistake, this team is even better than last year.
Well, are they going to go 6-3 on the road again?
They're fully capable of doing that. I trust Harbaugh and the discipline and what he brings to the team. Yeah, they can go 6-3 on the road. They have an interesting road game at Jacksonville. Last time they played Jacksonville, they blew a 27-0 playoff lead there.
I had Jacksonville that game.
Yeah. So I know Harbaugh wasn't there, but you better believe the media is going to bring that up, and you better believe Herbert remembers it, and so on and so forth. So there are winnable spots all over. They're not always going to have home field advantage. When they play Pittsburgh at home, that's not a home field advantage because Pittsburgh travels very, very well. It's probably going to be 70-30 in favor of Pittsburgh at that stadium.
We mentioned it when Harbaugh coached Michigan. Fundamentals and discipline is just job one. And it just feels to me the Chargers got the most out of that team that they were going to get, frankly, especially under the circumstances they had with the injuries and such. I remember the model spitting out the Chargers a couple of times, and it nauseated me, but they did fine. It's something I wasn't seeing, but it showed up in penalties. Huge advantage in penalties. So, I hate it when my team is giving away penalties. And if you're plus 151 for the season, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, well, the last coach had a problem with discipline and had a problem with getting people to follow what he was saying. So Harbaugh was the right choice in terms of that. Prior to the schedule layout that came out, I was all prepared to say, this is my number one team in that division ahead of Kansas City. The problem was the schedule layout came out, and even though the Chargers had a top 3 draft, Kansas City had, unusually, because it only happens every 4 or 5 years, and we're probably talking about them now, they had a top 10 draft. And we talked about Denver stretching the field a little bit more with Bo Mix. I guarantee you that Kansas City, especially what we saw the second half of the Super Bowl, with Worthy there now in his second year, with Hollywood Brown, He only played the last 3 games in the playoffs. Now he's there for the full year. And Rashee Rice there, at least at the start of the year. This is night and day going to be a stretch the field offense instead of that give me 5 yards in a cloud of dust that Reed and Mahomes hate.
What a division, I'll tell you. You know, I just hope they don't have an expansion anytime soon because, you know, when you get to know all these teams as well as we start to, and you see the potential and how, you know, one play here, one play there makes such a big difference sometimes. You don't want to dilute it with, you know, expansion because that ruined hockey. It ruined NBA as far as I'm concerned. And I don't want to see a repeat on that.
Well, the NFL will do what it wants to do. And if there's money in it, they're going to do it. So we can't control that. We can control where we place Kansas City. And I had to elevate them right there with Buffalo and Baltimore because this roster is better. There are no holdouts or this or that. They're even deeper at running back, a position that had some questions last year. Their kicking game is solid. So there's a lot of good. And let's not forget this one thing, Chris, staff continuity. They get to keep their defensive coordinator while everybody else is the next best thing or firing defensive coordinators. They get to keep Andy Reid. You know, there's a lot. You have to say that that's a perk to have the continuity. And then the schedule edges they have against both Denver in terms of placement and the Chargers, they're going to lose a few games, but I just can't erase them from the number 1 spot in the West because they have a lot of things going for them.
I left last season with what I've heard a lot of off season is basically Chiefs fatigue, you know.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of it. And I think a lot of people would be happy to see KC go down in flames and be done with them. And do we just want to wash the taste of them out of our mouths? We're sick of them. And, you know, the entire season, it was 1-score mania. I don't know what the final number was, but you know, it seemed like every single game was a 1-score game. And I just feel a team like this has been pretty darn quiet this off season. I feel like this is Kelsey's last season. He knows he didn't have the greatest season last year. And I think I couldn't help but think about the Chiefs when I was watching the Dallas series on Netflix and how Dallas didn't get that three-peat. And when they finally won the Super Bowl after they didn't, I just feel KC's going to be on that same mission, and they possibly could. They're just going to be focused. They're going to be on. They've got the talent. They had a great draft again. It's like the second year in a row. They filled holes. They've got Mahomes spreading out in preseason because he had I think his average yard per throw is just ridiculously low. So they want to widen that out this year, and you already see them working on it. I think that they're just, they didn't even bother to tell us that Andy Reid had somebody shooting at him in May and shooting into his office. So I just think that they're all business. You can't write them off. I think the other teams in the division all have the potential to win the division. Maybe, even the Raiders possibly could if they feel, that they did this, that, and the other. But I think Kansas City's probably going to be tough to beat.
If this is September 1st, 2024, Hollywood Brown's not there. Worthy hasn't played in the NFL yet. Rice is getting, a couple of steps away from getting hurt and stuff like that, and then his legal issues and stuff. And we have the same roster of the Chargers and Denver, Bo Nix's second year, Jim Harbaugh's second year. I would pick Kansas City third. They weren't ready last year. And at the end of the Super Bowl, I was prepared to pick Kansas City below the Chargers. But they have done nothing wrong this offseason.
Only 3 fumbles the entire season. That's something.
Yeah.
What was the somebody was just commenting on the penalties, and I believe that they were
plus
within
20
a hair.
for the whole year. Plus 20 for the whole year.
Plus
and
20 for the whole year.
Like I wrote in the report, you would have thought it was plus 1,000 the way things are going. Obviously, there were penalties at strange times that cost them or whatever, but they didn't have the penalty differential that people think they had.
That's it. That's all we can say about Kansas City. Let's go to Las Vegas, where Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly are staking their claim to. It seems like they keep on adding notable players. Do you think it's going to amount to much?
I don't, this Chip Kelly experiment is really weird. I would have stayed in college if I were Chip Kelly, but he got the national championship done as part of the Ohio State team. He did a lot of things at the University of Oregon. He hasn't done anything exciting in the NFL from a win standpoint, but he's always been intrigued by Pete Carroll, and he verbally said that because it was Pete Carroll, he agreed to go back and to do this. I'm sorry that Pete Carroll's in this division, because if they put him in Houston's division, I'm picking the Raiders to win the division. If you could get 2 games against Indy, Tennessee, Jacksonville, and Houston with their metrics issues, I'm okay. But boy, Pete Carroll's got a tough road to hoe, and Geno Smith has a ceiling to me. He kind of keeps teams in games, but does he win games without help? I'm not sure about that. He's a nice quarterback, but is he a top 12 quarterback? No.
The being in Vegas here, the word on the street was what's his name, O'Connell or McConnell, whatever his name is, was
the backup.
Yeah, was really looking good. Really looking good. So he obviously just went down with a hand injury, I think. So he's out for the first month plus of the season. But don't be surprised. Maybe that guy's hard work off season is going to pay off, and he might be taking the reins at some point.
Yeah, City by the Bay says he's surprised that I'm so high on the Raiders, but I haven't finished my remarks yet here. I mean, it's tough to win games. They do have some pluses. A Pete Carroll coach team is not going to be minus 16 in turnovers, I believe. So they're going to be fundamentally better than their last coach in terms of how to deal with that. They have obviously great tight ends. They have an okay offensive line. We don't know what Ashton Junty is capable of. We didn't see a time 40, which bothers me a lot personally. We saw him run wild against some of the weakest defenses that you'll ever see in the Mountain West Conference. That's not to say that he can't shoot out 1,300 yards. But here's the other fact, Chris, that has been proven since the time of O.J. Simpson and Barry Sanders. If your best player is a running back, you're not going to win a lot of playoff games. That's just the way it is. Ashton Junty could be the real deal, and the Raiders could still win 7 games because running backs with a good quarterback amplify things. We saw that. Barkley with the Giants was one thing. Barkley with the Eagles was a Super Bowl champ. Well, I don't think they have the roster around Junty to do all that stuff. And you're right, the defense is below par. And they have that 19 rest differential. And when you have a lot of new pieces, we're talking about what's the value of rest differentials. You have new coaching staff, although Pete Carroll's been through this before. But you have a lot of new players on the team, and they're going to be going here and there and so on and so forth. You have to say that it's at least a little bit of a negative that they have a minus 19 rest differential, especially when you're talking about all these tough divisional games.
You know what? I can't believe we failed to mention Antonio Pierce. That guy cost them, I don't know how many games last year. I mean, think about it. If they just had an average coach, they would have won more games, at least 3 or 4 games.
He was fast-tracked to head coach, and he was clearly unprepared.
Don't forget, you got a guy named Brady in the front office also that's going to be, hanging around and having an influence. So I think we know that the culture is going to change, and when you've got a Crosby on the field, who knows what happens.
Crosby makes other players better. He makes other players
How many games
better.
did Crosby miss last year? Was it like 3?
I want to say it was more than that even.
Was it? Yeah. So that's another factor.
Yeah, that's an impact player. There's no question about it. And his energy, not just his effectiveness, but his injury. What are your thoughts on Geno Smith being number 2 in most interceptions last season? In late game situations, Geno Smith hasn't always come through, and he had a decent group of wide receivers to throw to last year, but he didn't have a great quality offensive line. Seattle did not have a quality offensive line. Problem is the Raiders probably have a league average at best offensive line. So Carroll's going to have to put him in good situations. The offensive coordinator is going to have to put him in, Chip Kelly's going to have to put him in creative situations. And Kelly's capable of that, at least on the college standpoint. The question is, will what he did creatively in college ever translate to the NFL?
I thought he was pretty dismal last year, and I don't have high hopes for him. I think he can be serviceable. We'll just have to see. I think he's a net negative technically.
Yeah, there's just so many hurdles. He's not the finishing touch on the team. If he's the finishing touch on a team, we may view it differently, that he can go out and provide the cushion in order to get some wins. He's not going to lose the games, but he's not the finishing touch on this team. He's somebody that's going to have to create.
So I think we've accomplished what we wanted to do. We just touched base on each team. We didn't go too deep in the minutia of it all. We just kind of tried to hit the major points. And, I guess I'll just be repetitive and say, let's see what they do on the field. Forget the predispositions. Let's see what they do on the field. Don't be I'm in no rush to place a bet of any kind.
Apparently I was in a rush because most of my plays were made a few months ago. But the closing thought I have is that, I value what happened in the preseason and the offseason and stuff like that. But the team starts 0-0. Here's my closing advice. If somebody had a terrible offseason, some team, and they win their first game, they don't even remember who played or what day they played the offseason games. It doesn't matter. If somebody had a great preseason, like a Denver or other teams and so on, and they lose that first game, that wipes out whatever happened in the preseason. So as soon as the record flips from what you accomplished in the preseason, you throw out the preseason.
The Dallas Cowboy documentary was very good, and I recommend that. A lot of interesting angles on that.
Let's do it again tomorrow.
Are we doing it tomorrow? Okay.
Wednesday at noon, we'll tackle Dallas and the rest of the NFC. I'm sure we have some creative things to say about Detroit's division, wild division, much like the AFC West this year. So come back and join us tomorrow at noon Pacific time.
My internet worked perfectly. I'm very lucky. I've had lots of problems. Anyway, appreciate everybody joining us, and we will be back tomorrow. Thank you.